Rumping, we're grinding. We're here on the State of Football. It's part 116 edition, back in the saddle, RIC, in the place to be. Ric Serritella telling like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football here on the State of Football, along with my co-host John Murphy down in New Orleans. Your new home for real football talk in the mornings. Today's a Monday recap around the league. Playoff edition. In fact, we're going Champions edition because we got nothing but winners in the chat room. Of course, Ralph Ventre, the co-commissioner of the Northeast Football Conference, joining us right now like he does every Monday. Buckle up. We got the blades. We got the iron. We're sharpening it up. We're chopping it up. There's a lot to get to. Oh, by the way, College Football National Championship? We'll talk about that. Tomorrow, we've got Russell Landy on a Tuesday affair. We'll have all the recap of the College Football Championship along with the latest Combine buzz. We broke the news last week. The Combine was in jeopardy. We thought it may happen in April. It may not happen at all, folks. Hopefully, we get a consolidated version. We'll talk more about that with Russell Landy. Wednesday, we're going to have Coach Keith Grabowski, the legendary Coach Keith Grabowski, who will be joining us down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, which is exciting. And then Thursday, we have Dan Vandernat, the director over at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, Neil Stratton of Inside the League every Thursday, and a Football Friday recap with our guy, Big Law Lawrence Johnson. I'm sure we'll have a David Turner sighting some here throughout the week. And boy, oh boy, do David and Big Law need some help with the playoff pick'em standings, okay? We gave John his crown. We gave him his regular season crown. I'll be back at it next year hunting him down because there is an asterisk with that regular season championship. I'm just saying.
Well, there's not going to be an asterisk for the playoff one that you're all in the rear view mirror.
We're both 4-2. We're both 4-2. Big Law and David Turner are 2-4. So they're already 2 in the hole. All right. They're already 2 in the hole. But let's start off with the NFL playoff action. We'll kick it off with last night's game with the Steelers and the Browns. This one caught me a little bit off guard. Maybe, but maybe not. I heard rumblings about Big Ben. It could be cancerous in the locker room. I said, okay, well, they just beat the Colts. They came back and beat the Colts. So I'm going to ride with the Steelers. But especially with the Browns, the COVID issues, who's coaching, who's not a coach, who's not available, the makeshift offensive line. I said, hey, everything is aligned for the Steelers to win this game. And then, you kind of saw the spread come down, leading to kickoff. And the Browns come out like gangbusters. Now, Pittsburgh had a chance there at the end. I thought it was a bad decision personally. Right there at the end of the third, 4th and 1, you had the momentum. You kind of felt the game starting to shift. And the Browns, you saw it on their faces. You saw it on the sidelines. They were panicking. They said, hey, we don't know what's going on. If we can stop them here, Tomlin takes the penalty, elects to punt. The game was over from that point of view. So that's what I took out of it. The Steelers are done. Stick a fork in them. They start off 11-0, but they finish 1-5, and I'm expecting big changes on the horizon. I do believe you saw the final game of Big Ben Roethlisberger in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. We'll go over to John Murphy, of course, Toronto Argonauts, VP of Player Personnel, 2-time Grey Cup champion here on the Champions Edition of the State of Football. John, take it away, Pittsburgh and Cleveland.
Yeah, I think the thing that was leading me toward Cleveland during the week was the idea of I wasn't sure why. I didn't think Pittsburgh had done enough down the stretch to let Cleveland play against them, win a game, gain confidence, and actually make the playoffs. Why didn't you want to put your, foot on them, knock them out, and deal with the Dolphins with a rookie quarterback, and then maybe your offense against theirs and the two defenses probably would have been a better matchup, in that scenario for Pittsburgh. So to me, allowing Cleveland to stay alive, feel good about themselves, play against some of the Steelers guys, and keep the momentum going. And then I think when you've dealt with all the other things that Cleveland has dealt with in the past couple of years, I think kind of behind the scenes, this is not something new to them, right? You got to remember what we saw behind the scenes, no matter how much Hugh Jackson doesn't want us to to talk about it, right? You got to remember what you saw going on in Cleveland in the past couple of years. How many coaches and philosophies and things that are not normal to an NFL culture that you saw there. So to me, last night, it was like a perfect storm, for them to have to overcome all of those things, right? You heard Mayfield say, hey, there was an old lineman in our locker room who during warmups, I had to go say, hey, what's up? What did you say your name is? And by the fourth quarter, that guy's in there blocking and playing, right? So I think that the momentum that they're literally one more injury away from having to slap an O-line number on one of the D tackles, right? That they're out there and they're beating the Steelers, for the Cleveland Browns. First off, to make the playoffs. Secondly, you're playing against the Steelers on the road, and you're the team effectively running the ball, and the Steelers are throwing it 70 times in a playoff game. No matter what 2021 football looks like, it shouldn't look like that for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? And your 10-year center and your 14 or 15-year quarterback, he punts, he basically snaps it like a punt on the first play of the game, and Connor trying to jump on it at the 1-yard line. I mean, fundamental football, you just throw it out the back. What are you trying to do? You didn't even try to just surround it and scoop it and fall in a fumble the right way. You're still trying to pick it up on your own 1-yard line. So the fundamentals there seemed out of whack. And then only Cleveland sort of allowing you by saying, hey, they didn't want to let any big plays happen. And then they let Roethlisberger get in a rhythm. But for all intents and purposes, I mean, this is 35-10 at the half. So Roethlisberger and the offense and how they played down the stretch is a huge issue moving forward. But overall, this is a team that was 11-0, but unfortunately is a lot closer to the 1-5 team that we saw down the stretch. And for Cleveland, hey, now you're playing with easy money here. You're going to play the Chiefs in Kansas City, right? And I'm saying what it did do is I think it kind of gave Kansas City now the best of everything they could have asked for. You get a bye week. The two hot teams in terms of that were gaining momentum down the stretch. The Colts, they get bounced. The Titans with Derrick Henry and a one-off who could beat you with one thing, Derrick Henry, yep, he's out. This is the national championship, right? In all intents and purposes, what we've ever seen in all sports, the Browns won their championship yesterday, right? And then they'll go to Kansas City and get pancaked, right? Yeah. We've seen it 100 times where you knock off, right? You get there, and then you knock off, a divisional opponent, and the following week, Cleveland just can't come out flat, or it'll be 28-0 in the first quarter the other way. And then to me, now we get the real game is on the other side of the slate because whoever wins that game can now give the Chiefs a real run for their money. Well, the problem is, what happens if it's just a damn slugfest like you expect now between Ralphie's Bills and Lamar Jackson? And Ralph, it's going to be Bills for Ralph. And without a shadow of a doubt, Rick is going Ravens because he can't come back on the wagon. Ralphie can circle the wagon. Rick cannot circle the wagon this week and get on the Bills train. So Rick is losing one of these games this week because he's going all in Ravens.
Well, I appreciate you setting that up, John. And, before we dive into that whole scenario, I will say this. I like the new wild card format. I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. I like having the 3 games on Saturday and Sunday. And then this weekend we'll get another 2 games on Saturday and Sunday. So I hope they do keep it. I didn't know how I was going to feel about it, but I do like it. One other thing I'll say, the announcers keep showering Andrew Berry with all this praise. Give me a break. John Dorsey built this team. John Dorsey's the one that put them in position to get here. What did Andrew Berry do? He signed a couple free agent offensive linemen? I mean, give me a break. And I heard nothing but good things about Andrew Berry, but please. I mean, showering this guy with praise. Like he's the reason why this whole organization turned around. Give me a break.
And if they signed O-linemen behind the scenes, it wouldn't be surprising if Ryan Grigson had a lot of say or a lot of influence, or at least pointed them in the right direction of those things, because that's the live and learn part of doing your job. Is with the Colts, they had that young quarterback, right? They had that influential player, and they didn't surround them with enough protection, and it cost Andrew Luck and it cost Ryan Grigson. You saw they didn't make the same mistake now with Baker Mayfield. Double down in the backfield, give him another weapon at tight end, and then sign the O-line. Yeah, I'm betting Ryan Grigson had a little something to do with that behind the scenes, where he's resting comfortably as kind of the counselor, they're the kind of the way John Dorsey is in Philadelphia, at the moment. But I mean, hey, and it shows you to transition to the other side of the matchup for next week. You see the Browns, you build it the right way, right? You build it the old school way, and it works. Buffalo does the same thing. And then when it came time to give your quarterback what he needed, what do? Go get Diggs. What do you get? You're front and center, there in your division. And the same thing, in Baltimore, they've kept drafting their type players. They don't really mind that you don't think Patrick Queen should have gone where he went in the draft. They don't care that you didn't think they needed another running back, to get drafted. And then who are front and center in these games? Patrick Queen and J.K. Dobbins. Yeah. So draft what works for you, stick to your plan that you have, and do it consistently. Here we are. Those, 3 out of 4 teams, that are in it because of that. And you could also say the same about the Chiefs, because the Chiefs were one of the 2 or 3 teams in the league that saw the raw talent of Mahomes and just said, that's our guy, and made it a point to go get him.
No doubt about it. It's the state of football. Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Ralph Ventre here with you on a Monday morning. It is January 11th, 2021, 9:20 a.m. Eastern here, along with John and Ralph. Ralph, let's bring together this AFC picture, because we had 2 really other good games. The Chiefs, as far as I'm concerned, are getting another bye by playing the Browns. But who knows? They surprised me with Pittsburgh. Maybe it'll surprise. I doubt it. Baltimore and Tennessee was everything we thought it would be, right? And then, Buffalo and Indianapolis. Again, I kind of viewed it as a coin toss game. I did feel good about Buffalo winning the game. They prevail. And I honestly, truly believe for this year, right now, at this time, the Bills and the Ravens do have the best chance to knock off the Chiefs. They will meet. Tell us what you saw this weekend, Ralph. Tell us what you're seeing. Tell us where we're going.
Well, first of all, I know you mentioned the playoff format, and that's here to stay. That was part of the new bargaining agreement that kicks in next year, but they agreed to start that new playoff format a year early. So that format had nothing to do with COVID. That was put in by the owners and the players, an extra playoff spot in each league. And, that's here to stay. Unfortunately, this is the 1 year where the Bills finish number 2 and they don't get that bye. But they did take care of business against the Colts. And as far as this game, people are going to knock Frank Reich for whether he went for it on 4th down toward the end of the first half. But in reality, I think the Colts and that coaching staff had a great game plan on both sides of the ball, and I thought they executed fairly well. I really think that the Bills took the Colts' best shot, and the Colts were an 11-win team. So I really feel that the Bills, not that they played a bad game, but it was probably their worst game in 10 weeks, and they still beat an 11-win team. And really, the quarterback was fantastic. Josh Allen, 370-plus yards, 3 touchdowns. There was the one play at the end where he took the sack, the fumble. That could have been disastrous. But other than that, I mean, he was the MVP of the game. And of course you mentioned Diggs, and of course you mentioned what the Bills have done, all that the Bills have done to surround him with that talent. You saw Cole Beasley playing a little banged up, still reliable, 7 catches. But I really feel that the Bills were the better team. Rivers is at the end. Although he did have a little guile, he had some savvy. The thing with Rivers is he's not going to be confused by anything, and he's going to know where to go with the ball, but can he physically get it there nowadays? But the one thing I have to say about the Colts is, I believe it was Cole Beasley said that he thinks the Colts were the best defense that the Bills have faced all year. I want to look on the other side of the ball, and that Colts offensive line, I know they were down the 1 tackle, but that Colts offensive line is phenomenal. I mean, you can't get near Rivers. I think the Bills were credited all day with 1 quarterback hit, no sacks. I believe the Colts had the fewest sacks in the whole NFL. So really that offensive line is something else. And that's how you build a team as well, as John will tell you. You're talking about all these teams that are left hanging around and still alive for the Super Bowl, and it's no secret as to why. Now, you look at the Ravens-Titans, Lamar had a couple of those explosive plays, but other than that, I mean, it's not like the Ravens were by any means unstoppable. And, Mike Vrabel, what are you doing punting away your season? I mean, come on, 4th and 2 from the 40, and you're punting the ball in the 4th quarter? Like, are you playing to lose? So that was a real head-scratcher. But needless to say, I think the Ravens were playing really well heading into the playoffs, and they executed their game plan. Ryan Tannehill threw a terrible pick late in that game to pretty much deep 6 Tennessee. And, the Ravens rolled on. The Bills, both teams were extremely hot going into the playoffs. They both survived the first-round matchups, and it's going to be a great battle on Saturday night. And I want to mention last year the Bills did play the Ravens in the regular season. They held Lamar Jackson under 200 total yards. I believe it was one of his worst statistical games of the season. It was either Hayden Hurst or Mark Andrews got loose on a busted coverage for a touchdown. It was a 1-score game. So buckle up, baby. I think we're in for a good one on Saturday night. So
yeah, and I will say Lamar Jackson, his demeanor, it looks like we're either at the crossroads or the maturation of Lamar Jackson. Him coming back out and kind of hanging out in the tunnel and greeting all of his teammates as they came off the field, and just the confidence the last 2 years going one and done in the playoffs. Not only did he look like a deer in headlights, but I think it was a real learning process, right? To just sit there all off season and let that marinate. I think this guy's on a mission. I think this is going to be an extremely close game. I will say the one kind of matchup where I'm looking is it seemed like the Bills, and Ralph, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like between Doyle and Mo Alley Cox, they had trouble with the tight ends. And I think that's a strong point of Baltimore, right? Like Mark Andrews is the ultimate safety net for Lamar Jackson. They got a couple guys just like the Colts that they can bring in, move around. To me, I think that could be an issue there for Buffalo.
I agree. The Bills have to watch out for the Ravens tight ends, but I still think Lamar Jackson is limited in the passing game. I don't know if he sees things like Rivers did. Obviously, Jack Doyle had himself a day, but on that 1 touchdown in the 4th quarter, that was clearly a blown coverage. Matt Milano, I don't know if he was just kind of looking confused and just let basically Doyle run freely into the end zone. So, but no, the Ravens tight ends you have to look out for. Lamar Jackson, though, even yesterday, he showed he struggles throwing outside the numbers. I mean, he threw a disgusting-looking interception yesterday in that first half. And I think you just have to contain him. Bills held him 11 carries, 40 yards last year, and make him throw outside the numbers. Make him beat you. He's not Phillip Rivers. And to be honest with you, the one thing that scares me about the Ravens is the Ravens' defense. I know they're highly ranked in a number of statistical categories. They shut down what was a pretty good Tennessee offense, a pretty balanced Tennessee offense yesterday. So I think the Ravens' defense really is what worries me as a Bills fan. I'm not really worried about Lamar Jackson. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he runs for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, but I'll take my chances.
Well, Hollywood Brown is emerging as kind of their go-to guy, just like Diggs is for Buffalo. And I know Robin Backsab, I saw her floating around in the chat room. She's doing cartwheels here on the state of football.
Yeah, but let's be honest. I'm all for a good comparison, but Hollywood Brown to Stephon Diggs, Diggs led the league in receptions and receiving yards. I mean, he's number 1 or number 1A in the game outside of Devontae Adams, and you're talking about Hollywood Brown? I mean, come on, dude. Hollywood Brown. You've been loving this Hollywood Brown all since last year. I remember as soon as he had that long touchdown in Miami in week 1, you were all about this Hollywood Brown, dude. A lot of hype with Hollywood Brown. I don't see any Hollywood.
He's a good.
Hey, I'll give you another one, though, real quick while we're on the receivers. How about my man Juju, dude? He's got plenty of time to go on TikTok now. Plenty of dancing to do now, Juju. A lot of off time. He won't be playing next week, so. And all those gray faces on that Cleveland Browns team, huh? I mean, you think a guy would finally get it? What is going on out there in Pittsburgh? You think they finally – and nobody told this guy, nobody said, hey, what are you doing, man? And especially the Steelers, they're supposed to have this standard of how they want to compare themselves almost to the Yankees, that brand, that Americana that everybody knows – first class, and then they got this clown out there, and he doesn't even produce. I just read, so I not just because it's on the internet, folks, doesn't mean it's always true. So I want to qualify this statement because I did see it on Twitter. I don't know if it's accurate, but he as Juju Smith-Schuster, did not have a single 100-yard receiving day all year. But he certainly did a lot of talking. A lot of talking.
Yeah, it seems like, they got rid of Antonio Brown for all the distractions, and Juju Smith-Schuster just picked up right where AB left off, and he's more worried about his social media following, it seems like, than anything else. But, hey, it's the state of football here. Ric Serritella, Ralph Ventre, John Murphy breaking it down for you, the people, January 11th, 2021. All right, any wrapping up the AFC. Any final thoughts here, John, before we shift gears?
Well, I think, hey, look at what the Bills were able to accomplish yesterday as the Colts are the first team to go for 450 and no turnovers and lose. So, I mean, that's as good an offensive output, as you're going to say. So, I mean, it does give you, reason to believe that even with maybe a Lamar broken coverage or a Lamar, 1 or 2 Lamar plays that maybe, against the Bills, the result may not be the same as what you got there. Now, on the flip side, one of the things to pay attention to is they're likely now without Zach Moss. And we kind of mentioned what he had been able to do down the stretch the second half of the season. So falls back on Singletary. Is there somebody else? Is there something they can come up with there? Probably more Josh Allen, running the ball, likely, next week. So could have the most rushing yards combined, by 2 quarterbacks in a playoff game, when you look at both of those 2 guys. And then I think you have to look at the other side, and just say, hey, you're playing with clean money here. Now, if you're the Browns, your fans are going to be celebrating all the way through kickoff. There, I think you just have to find a way to get over that win and not have the atmosphere of playing in Kansas City be too big, right? Because it will not be shocking to anybody to see the same thing happen to them that they just did to the Steelers. But if you can contain it and come in there playing with that emotion and with that edge that we have nothing to lose, suddenly maybe you can force the turnovers, get a pass rush, get a team that hasn't played. And remember, if you want any little signal of life for the Browns, Mahomes didn't play the final week. Is there any chance in the first quarter, first half, that you're a little off rhythm? Just let one ball go off of Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce and turn into a turnover. You just need one play, but I think it's the emotional factor of this, right? Like, if you're still sitting there today, if you're in that situation, there's some of those guys who haven't left the office yet, right? You're so gassed for what just got done there, especially for anybody that's been a part of it, for the long haul, no pun intended, Jimmy Haslam, long hauling, finally gets it done, right? But you can only imagine how those guys are feeling with everything they've been through. And now you get to add back, hopefully, some of your parts. Maybe you have your head coach, or maybe Stefanski's got to stay in the basement. Hey, hey, when something works, you stick with it. Prefer's undefeated in the playoffs. Maybe he's the head coach the rest of the way. Keeps Stefanski in the basement, So,
that's the thing, John. Yeah, no, that's the thing. What you're saying with the Browns is, to me, they've had an emotionally exhausting week with the coaching staff, the COVID, Stefanski, and then going up against a rival. First of all, clinching a playoff spot and what it meant for that franchise, ending the drought. And you're riding that wave on top of all the COVID stuff. And then you're playing a primetime game against the big, bad Pittsburgh Steelers. And then you have the emotion of that performance. And also the history between the Browns, the recent history between the Browns and the Steelers, not really pretty. So, yeah, all of this emotion, and how much did it take out of the Browns, and how much will they have left when they have to go to Kansas City, who's been sitting there on the bye? It's certainly a monumental task for Cleveland. You also mentioned about resting Mahomes the final week of the season. I do want to point back to last year's divisional round. The Chiefs got off to a slow start. The Texans jumped out. I want to say it was like a 24-0 lead, something crazy like that. And then, of course, Mahomes went wild and the Chiefs, marched on. So who's to say maybe they start off slow again? That's something to watch for. And then you mentioned with the Bills running backs. For Buffalo, I honestly think Josh Allen is their best runner, but Singletary's capable, and we'll see as far as the second guy in that rotation. Will they call up Antonio Williams again, the undrafted free agent from North Carolina? He was on the practice squad. He played Week 17. And then you've had TJ Yeldon, who has been on the inactive list for, I think, like 15 of 16 games this year. But TJ Yeldon, certainly big-bodied, capable, can pick up the blocks and pass protection, catch the ball out of the backfield. So we'll see what the Bills have in store there. But there's a few options. Oh, and then you have Taiwan Jones as well, primarily a special teamer, but obviously he can play the position. So, but I think John is right when he says that they will miss a little bit from Zach Moss, because I believe they were really starting to trust him. And he was starting to carve out a nice role for himself before that. But yeah, as you know, TJ Yeldon from the Crimson Tide, Alabama, plays tonight. And I know Rick wanted to touch on that game, but I guess he's saving that for the end of the show, because that's our Monday Night Football, right? We would normally have our Monday Night Football picks, but instead it's going to be Ohio State and Alabama. And I'm sure John will outpick Rick in that one as well. So
no, he won't. We'll get there. We'll get to it. It's good to see TJ Yeldon sighting potentially. I forgot he's even in the league, but you talk about all these Alabama running backs kind of just hanging around. Next thing you know, man, what's his name? He was with the Lions. Bo Scarborough. Be suiting him. But hey, It's the state of football here, you there, Monday morning, January 11th, 2021. Shout out to our super producer, Samantha, behind the scenes. I forgot my laptop charger, so I will need to juice this bad boy up when you get a chance. We've got time, so no rush there. All right, so, let's turn our attention to this NFC playoff picture because the Saints, as expected, took care of business. And I think, honestly, this could be now maybe the most exciting game we get in the playoffs. I think it's the NFC Championship, the Buccaneers and the Saints. And I say that because I truly believe the Rams have the best defense of any team still on the board, alive in the playoffs. The Rams have the top defense. They're going to knock off the Packers, okay? I'm just putting that out there right now. So this game between the Bucs and the Saints, essentially, in my opinion, is going to ultimately be the NFC Championship because I think whoever wins this game will go on. Now, you mentioned Phillip Rivers and the lack of arm strength. Drew Brees, and here's the deal. Like, a guy like Daniel Jones could survive if he had the cerebral awareness of a Drew Brees, right? So, you don't need arm strength to be a successful quarterback. Drew Brees proved that yesterday. I mean, he's literally just pushing the ball out there. With I thought it was the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, the way these things are just floating. But they're getting it. They're moving the chains, and they're winning the games. So, John Murphy, tell me what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing again was, we mentioned it yesterday, but for the Bears, unfortunately, not only did the defense struggle to stop that, but then the offense kind of went backward and, kind of looked the way they had looked at other times. Trubisky better than, what you've seen, but not good enough. They have some weapons, but then they lose, Darryl Moody. So there was your opposite guy, the field stretcher to go with, Allen Robinson. You don't really get anybody other than Allen Robinson. Montgomery gets shut down, and that kind of ends that, scenario for them. But I think the confidence builder of playing good defense for the most part against the Vikings, then coming back, playing good defense, in this metric, even though it's a playoff game and it's the Bears and it's wild card week, you got good defense. You didn't have any misfortune, no wacky turnovers or plays that just didn't, kind of fit your season. Now you get the three-peat, which is what everybody expected. They expected week one, and they expected there to be a playoff matchup, between, Brees and Brady. I still think it comes down to the same two things that you've concerned yourself with when it comes to both of these teams. I don't have any confidence in that O-line of Tampa's. Tampa can, not from what I've seen. Good pass rush teams have given them trouble. Ronald Jones, highly unlikely that he is at 100%. Maybe they get him closer, and they were willing to sacrifice a roster spot this week because Shady McCoy was away dealing with issues. If Shady McCoy had been there and healthy, he probably would have dressed because Jones was just not going to be ready to play. And you've seen, unfortunately, with, Kevin Vaughn, now he's had some drops, he's had a fumble, and he's had a missed pass, block and assignment. He's playing like a rookie at times when the rest of the Tampa Bay offense are vets. So he kind of stands out like a sore thumb. And Fournette's running style, while good enough to get you through last week, if you don't have an explosive player in the backfield, you're now playing into that same model of what's happened in the first two matchups. On the flip side, the front is really good. White can make plays for them with Levante David. To me, the issue still is who's covering Michael Thomas, who's covering Kamara, and then when they try to do that and they try to put somebody to the outside, Jared Cook is right there in the middle of the field by himself again. What have they learned in these matchups, but more importantly, do they have the players to offset what is going to be done? And on the other side, does that same combination of two quarterbacks work a third time against the same team? Now, it did in 2 out of 3 weeks against the Falcons. It worked. Didn't think it would work, but it worked with them going yin and yang against Atlanta. Tampa Bay, better team, better offense. So, to me, I think it's a lot of what we've seen. Then you add in the Tom Brady in the playoffs. Tom Brady in the playoffs, having never lost to the same team 3 times in a season. So you have to, you have that going for you. But also remember, it's not that hard to do because, as crazy as it sounds, 20 out of the 32 matchups where the team has won 2 in a row in the regular season and then faced the same team a third time in the playoffs, the team that went 2-0 won the third game. So predominantly it continues to happen. And to me, those are 2 really tough spots, your secondary and your O-line, to say that you can just show up with the same guys and have a totally different outcome, than what you saw. Because they were under siege the last time they played in both of those 2 areas. We got to see what comes out of this early, and to me, if I'm the Saints, I'm going more to that Latavius Murray and Kamara game plan.
That's the formula.
Hold them off the field, turn Brady one-dimensional, and then that, to me, you're just looking for the win, right? We're just looking to win. You're not looking to win by style points. It doesn't have to be 55-17 again. Now you're just looking for style points. And the whole metric of winning week 1 literally set the tone for why you have the home playoff. And even with 2,500 people, even with no crowd noise, I think that's the one part of this that neither one of them is at their full strength physically. Brady still throws 45 touchdowns, 1 for every year old he is, right? And now the big matchup is Lattimore and Antonio Brown, right? So Tom Brady with the longest sleepover in the history of the NFL, him and Antonio Brown have a real shot here if they can make several connections down the field, which is something the Saints have fixed, but they're not perfect at it, at this stage.
No, I mean, listen, when you're leaning on guys like Janoris Jenkins to be your top lockdown corner, it's very vulnerable back there. And, the Bucs fell 24-23 in week 1, and then they got blown out 38-3, I think, in week 9. So it'll be interesting to see. The stats that John mentioned do hold some credence. I think when you're messing with Tom Brady, though, all the statistical data kind of goes out the window. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be honest with you. You guys know Tampa Bay was my Super Bowl preseason prediction, and I'm not going to jump off the wagon. I'm going to roll with them. But I'm telling you, I think it's going to be a tough matchup. And I think where they lose, if they do lose, the category that I'm pointing to is in the coaching department. And I love your cousin Brucey, but Sean Payton and his staff, I think, are just smarter than you and your staff. And I think that could be what, when it's all said and done, I think that's what it could come down to. So we shall see. But let's not count out those Green Bay Packers, Ralph, because they got a power running back, A.J. Dillon, coming over from Boston College, very familiar with the cold temperature. We saw what he could do down the stretch. However, Jared Goff being inserted into the game turned out to be somewhat of a blessing in disguise. I'm glad he found his big boy pants at halftime or whatever and trotted out onto the field. I was wondering why he wasn't playing to begin with. But again, I'll go back to my aforementioned point is that the Rams, to me, have the best defense, and there's something to be said for that. What's your take? Put your finger on the pulse, Dr. Ralph. Tell us how you see this NFC.
Well, I'm just flabbergasted by how poorly Russell Wilson played in that wild card game, or excuse me, that super wild card game. He kind of looked lost out there. But and we know Seattle, there were vulnerabilities with their defense all year long. The Prez, Jamal Adams, another tough day for him at the office. So I think I saw something on Twitter that he has as many playoff wins as the Jets do this year. So shout out to Jamal Adams and the Seahawks. But with that said, the Rams defense played really well. What is the status of Aaron Donald moving forward? Forgive me for not knowing that, but I know he had some problems. I don't know if it was an abdomen injury, but he left the game on Saturday. Obviously, he had a few great plays early on in that game, and he is maybe the premier defensive player in football. So you say the Rams have a great defense. I think Aaron Donald has a lot to do with that. But, of course, obviously there are 11 guys on the field at one time. So with that said, the Rams got the defense going, but what about that offense? I know Akers has emerged. That draft pick is looking like a good one now. But at quarterback, is Goff capable? It looked like his throwing hand was definitely affected by some way with that thumb injury. He threw a couple of really ugly balls, and really, where did he finish? Like 7 for 17 or something like that. So the Rams at quarterback, that could be something that holds them back during this playoff run. Packers are the number 1 seed. That's a pretty bold prediction on your part, Rick, to say that the Rams are going to go in there to Green Bay and shut them down. But we'll see. I did like the Rams heading into the playoffs, but the Goff injury to me is a huge piece of the puzzle. I know he got surgery or whatever, but it certainly looked like something was up with that thumb.
Yeah, he's out there Steve DeBergen it, right? And so he got, some game action under his belt. We're not asking him to go out and win the game. We're asking him to go out, steer the ship, hand the ball off to Cam Akers about 30 times or so. And, I think it's going to come down to the running game for as much success that Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers have had this season. Without A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones clicking on all cylinders, well then, hey, the Packers are going to have trouble toppling the Rams. They've got a stingy defense. There's something to be said for that in January. And I just checked Aaron Donald ribcage injury. He is good to go. It's not going to affect his game time status. So that's the state of the NFC. Final quick thought wrap up here, John, before we move over to the College Football Championship on this Champions Edition of the State of Football.
Yeah, so I think the underrated portion of the Rams is, how well their secondary and even, the 2 rookies that are on the field in nickel and dime situations. I think the running game, like you mentioned, I think the factor that amazingly the backup quarterback this week for the Rams could be none other than Blake Bortles. Wouldn't that be something? The Goff thing worries me more this week. You're in Green Bay, with those teams in the cold, and when you watch, go back and see go watch what Goff is doing on handoffs. He's taking it and then moving it to his left hand. He's handing off kind of in a funky manner to keep the handoffs away from banging the thumb every time. That's an odd way to hand off. And Troy Aikman had gone through the metrics of that, a couple of times, talking about, how him and Emmett had some issues, and almost some fumbles, there. And then again, the weather, it's cold, the weather with the ball, the weather with the wind. If you're winning, it's going to be a dirty 20-17, it's going to be a that type of game. But you saw what threw them off was the Seahawks had no answer for the blitzing. And a guy that could really put himself front and center, Wink Martindale did it yesterday, shutting down Derrick Henry. If you go to Green Bay and limit them offensively and win the game, Brandon Staley keeps putting himself higher and higher that this offseason or next, he's going to end up a head coach somewhere, NFL or college. And it seems like he's going to be able to sidestep a few of those steps that normally you have to take. And he's going to be the defensive guy, that's going to get a shot under 35, there as the way that they had them confused, the coverage, the way they had Metcalf locked down, and you still didn't hear from Lockett, right? So that's something that, to look at. It's not just Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald out there. They're coming at them in waves, and whatever Chicago couldn't figure out, the Brandon Staley and the Rams have no trouble figuring out how to use Leonard Floyd, because he looks like the draft pick that you expected when you took him. As all of a sudden he's turned himself into, being a guy that on the regular is creating trouble. And in 3 games against the Seahawks, he sacked Russell Wilson 7 times this year. That's crazy to think, from a statistical standpoint. So I think the Rams have an excellent shot to go in there. The Rams clearly aren't worried about who their quarterback is. And I think it might be Wolford if healthy, because they're looking at what you're looking at, which is we just have to keep the game clean, and we have a real shot here, and Hecker had an off day, but, with their special teams and their defense and running the ball. Now, the one thing there would be if David Edwards is out. David Edwards is a grinder, mauler type guy. Bobby Evans is a better athlete, but a little soft in the tush. So, that's a different body type, different kind of guy, in there at left guard. If Edwards isn't in there and Evans is, better athlete, but not as thick and just not that mauler mentality that David Edwards has. So that's a little, knock against them. But the way they run and the pre-snap motion and the way that they're able to, create lanes for Cam Akers. Cam Akers is another one that's really established himself as being equal or better than his evaluation, because there's one thing you just can't sometimes overlook. That big body running 4.4 is a problem.
Yeah, and you take a look at that Ramondre Stevenson. There's a little bit of that there. So I will say this: the Rams defense is way better than when they went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago with Wade Phillips. And yes, kudos to the defensive coordinator, but kudos to Jalen Ramsey, because he is the DK Metcalf eraser in a season where nobody could stop this man. Jalen Ramsey did it on multiple occasions. And so I'm looking at you, Jalen Ramsey, to lock down Devontae Adams. I'm looking at you, Leonard.
I just want to mention one thing here, not to interrupt. I know you're on a roll here with the Rams, but I think Jalen Ramsey gave up 1 touchdown all year. 1 touchdown all year. Happened to be to Stephon Diggs, but I mean, hey, who's counting? But yeah, just want to let you know that. So he has been the lockdown corner, but just the Buffalo Bills give him trouble. But he's not playing the Buffalo Bills this week.
No, I honestly believe Jalen Ramsey is the top cornerback in the league right now today. So, when you got Ramsey and Donald, Floyd, and the others, watch out, Green Bay. You heard it here first. Ric Serritella here on The State of Football, along with John Murphy, my co-host, each and every day on The State of Football. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, your new home. For real football talk in the morning. Who else is breaking it down for the people like we do? Of course, every Monday, Northeast Conference Commissioner Ralph Ventre, the co-commissioner of the NEC, here with us on a football Monday. And David Turner throwing some shade your way, Ralph. He wears the Buffalo fandom with pride. And I know what Ralph is rooting for. Ralph is rooting for a Cleveland win so Buffalo can host the AFC Championship, and he can make that trek up there to the Mafia. But hey, we've got a few minutes here to toy around with the college football championship. Of course, tonight, I believe it's 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit with the call usually here. Alabama coming in as a pretty considerable favorite. It's up to 8.5. Vegas expecting a high flying scoring affair. I wonder what the record is for all time points in the national championship being scored here. I have a feeling we might see close to 100 points, but I don't know. I thought the NFL playoff games would be more high scoring than what I thought, but it's playoff time. It's January time. They will have the setting and the field to score a lot of points. But how do you see this one, Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, I think I do not think if it is going to score a lot of points that it's going to be necessarily, even. I don't see a 45-40 or anything close to that. I think Alabama has a chance to do what they've done to both Florida and Notre Dame. I don't see any difference with that. I also see the factor of what we just talked about with Cleveland and Kansas City is also on display here. Ohio State had to get prepared, had to be ready, had to deal with all the COVID stuff, playing against Clemson. Tired of hearing about they shouldn't have been there. Tired of hearing about how many games they played. Tired of hearing about how they got ranked 11th, by that team and showed up, showed out, set their precedent, and now their reward for that is they get Alabama at full strength. Alabama at full strength and potentially full strength, and the new Batman gets the old Batman to come rejoin him on the field, and suddenly Mechie becomes Robin, but now he's got two co-hosts, not one. So if Jalen Waddle can play at all, there's another guy that Shaun Wade can't cover. Sorry, Shaun. You did give up 6 touchdowns this year. You might give up 6 tonight.
Is he now a safety prospect at this point, John?
No, I think it's more that he's, it's go back to what you did well, watch his film at slot, and if that's what you're drafting, you're probably okay. Or someone's going to look at it and say, hey, here's what I would do with his technique, and I still think he's a guy. Well, you're not anywhere in the, vicinity of Patrick Surtain at this time, in my books. And to me, it has to be something Alabama does that we haven't seen, right? It has to be Mac Jones with turnovers. It has to be Najee Harris with a fumble. It has to be shutting down one part of this when Notre Dame shut down Clemson's run game, and all of a sudden Clemson looked normal. But they also looked normal because they had a freshman quarterback. In this scenario, if you shut down Harris, you get Mac Jones, right? If you shut down Mac Jones and play coverage, then you get Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. Either way, what you're going to get is a lot of Alabama offense again. And I think it puts those guys in some interesting territory because they do have, Cooper, and they do have Werner, and Browning and Shaun Wade, but the matchups are just, like I said, it's one after the other. Can you hope if you're Ohio State, you're fresher, you've played less games, can you score with them? We'll see if Justin Fields is 100. You have Sermon, Olave outside. I mean, you can make plays and if I'm them, take the ball. You win the toss, get the ball, hold on to it, try to keep Alabama's offense off the field as much as you can in the first half. Have at least a lead or some momentum so that it's not coming back, from multiple scores down. And then hope something plays your way. Because you do have Justin Fields. He is a better playmaker and quarterback than Mac Jones. You're having to rely on the factor that maybe the second pick in the draft can take you and win the game. And he doesn't have to really do it single-handedly, but he has to do it with a lot of things going, against them, just in the manner of there's not a lot of spots on the field that you have a pure win over Alabama. And is Justin Fields a better quarterback? Yes. But look at what you're talking about. Justin Fields, maybe a top 5 pick, and Mac Jones has played as well as any other quarterback in college football this year, right? So the difference between at the beginning of this year saying we have Justin Fields, oh yeah, who do you have, Mac Jones? Now that has concised to about this much different. Trey Sermon has had about 500 yards in his last couple of games. Yeah. And Najee Harris, pretty much the same. So anywhere that you think Ohio State has an edge, the problem is Alabama's guy is just as good or better. And I think just the add-in factor of if Jalen Waddle really can give you any snaps, I mean, that's just fun to watch. Might not be fun to play against or defend. But now to watch all 4 of those receivers that Alabama has and 2 running backs and the way the O-line played, I think the one area to concentrate on early is how does Chris Owens and that front play? Because the one hiccup in Alabama's giddy-up right now is the no center. So having to play with your backup center, don't have there be a bad snap. Saw that last night on the first play for the Steelers. Don't have balls on the ground. And if you do get into short yardage or goal line, can Ohio State get a couple of early stops or force a punt, out of Alabama, which I don't even know if they still have a scholarship punter because they probably haven't used them all season. So to me, it's slowing it down, slow the pace down if you're Ohio State, which is against what your formula was against Clemson, which was speeding it up to be up-tempo against them. Alabama, you want to slow it down, try to get this game to be in the under category, and hope that maybe that style by the 3rd and 4th quarter leans on Alabama's defense by playing a whole lot more than they have. Then maybe you're fresher. Maybe that's a concept of how you get Ohio State to a national championship. If not, I think it's a 2-score game for Alabama.
Well, I will say this, the center being absent, I know Mr. Cooper and that Ohio State Buckeye defensive line is licking their chops. I do believe they have one of, if not the best linebacker units in the nation. So I do believe that they can contain Najee Harris. You can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him. The deal with Jalen Waddle, if he plays, I think it's stupid. I don't know who's advising him to do this, but it's dumb because if he comes back and plays, now I'm putting him in the John Ross, Henry Ruggs category where is the guy just always going to be hurt? Because if he comes back and we know he's coming back from an injury, but then you try to come back and you leave because of another injury. It's just like, man, you're already 5'8" and change. You missed the entire season. Like, what are you doing? Get right. Go get right and go earn yourself millions of dollars because if you get hurt again, could cost you. Go ask Jalen Smith. Dallas Cowboys had to wait for his payday. I will say this. I think that Justin Fields is a much better quarterback than Mac Jones, despite what the numbers tell you. You give him that offense, I can only imagine what the numbers might look like. So I do think there's a big advantage there. Trey Sermon is playing as good as anybody in the nation right now, and they do have Olave, who, knock, knock, first round, I might be coming for you. So I think Ohio State has the ammunition. I think they have the talent. I think they have the firepower. I think in a way the COVID thing, it's just constantly keeping your team on edge. It might actually work beneficial to them. So as George W. Bush so eloquently said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I went against the Buckeyes last week against Clemson. I'm not going to do it again this week versus Alabama. So all you listening audience at home, you can take the points. I'm going to leave them to the side. I got Ohio State outright. Ralph, who you got?
I'm going with Alabama. I'm going with John on this side. I'll go with the winner of the pick competition. So yeah, we'll go with Alabama to outclass Ohio State here. Obviously, when you think of college football at the Division I FBS level, over the past 10 years, Obviously, Alabama has been the standard. Of course, Clemson had its 15 minutes and some other schools as well. But, I mean, Alabama has been Alabama. I think they've had the most appearances in the championship game over the past 10 years. So this is where they're supposed to be. Anything less than a national championship for Alabama is a failure of a season. So Nick Saban or the Crimson Tide will earn Nick Saban's money for him. On a side note, it's just insane the amount of money that guy makes, as he is the highest paid employee in Alabama. So with the money he's making, Alabama better win the national championship tonight. But with that said, yeah, I'm going with John. Crimson Tide, roll Tide.
Well, I shall return back here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, the sole victorious one on the panel. But it'll be a fun game. It should be exciting. If you're into the NFL draft, I would imagine there's probably going to be, throughout the course of the game, 30 to 40 players who step foot on this field who will be playing on Sunday. So if you're into that kind of thing, well, hey, it's going to be that kind of party. Tomorrow we'll have Russell Landy here, and a lot of the interviews with head coaches and GMs. I see Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. are going to get interviews with the Cowboys. We'll break all that down. You know, we just talked about Alabama. Well, hey, the rich are getting richer over in Miami with the Dolphins. They got their franchise quarterback. Despite what Ralph says, they're all in. And, oh, by the way, they have the third pick. And, oh, by the way, your good friend John Barry Jackson reporting this morning the Miami Dolphins are confirmed to be one of the teams to coach in the Senior Bowl. And with all that draft equity, if you're a Dolphins fan, you've got to be excited about that. So we'll dive into that a little bit more tomorrow. But it's time for parting shots. Ralph Ventre, the co-commissioner of the Northeast Conference. Make sure you go follow him at NEC Ralph. Joins us here each and every Monday. Always a fun time chopping it up in the chop shop. Ralph, what do you got for the listening audience today?
Well, if I were the Dolphins, I'd be excited about possibly acquiring Deshaun Watson. I don't know if you guys were following any of that chatter that was coming out, how Deshaun Watson is unhappy with the Texans and the organization. What's that?
I think I created that chatter, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, with that said, if he wants to go to Miami and I'm Miami, I'll give him Tua. I'll take a couple picks. I'll whatever they want for Deshaun Watson, because if he goes to Miami, they're an instant contender. Regardless of what you say about Tua, I'll take Watson over Tua any day. With that said, it was a great wild card weekend. Unfortunately, the Dolphins weren't in it, but it was a great wild card weekend. 6 games, and the NFL marches on. I can't wait for the divisional round. You know, maybe we're looking at Bills-Browns in the AFC Championship game. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, not only did the Dolphins not make it, but I'm sure you're happy that the Patriots did not make it this year. So Ralph Ventre, our residential Buffalo Bills president, wagon driver, whatever you want to call him, he'll be up there, I'm sure, in Buffalo if they do. If the Browns knock off the Chiefs and the Bills beat the Ravens, Ralph, I'll take the drive with you, brother. All right, John Murphy, we'll be back at it again tomorrow here, 10 a.m. Eastern on the State of Football, your new home for real football talk in the mornings. How do you want to end tonight's this morning's hour of power?
Well, we do know if that happens, Ralph, it's only a question of when, not if, you would end up putting Rick through a table. So we got to root for that happening. And none of those wrestling tables, a real one.
We're renting the Winnebago, baby. We're coming off Jimmy.
Rick wants to take the real bump. He doesn't want the legs to just fall out the table. He wants the real bump. But I think one of the things that stuck out to me yesterday, at the end of watching the Titans-Ravens game would be 4 years ago at the draft and leading up to the draft, you heard and started hearing the story of Lamar Jackson. And the more you heard the story, the more you wanted to root for that kid. You know, and to think about him yesterday at some point after that game, thinking back to the factor that it was his mom and his brother. That's how he trained coming up as a kid. You know, that's who stood by him and, you know, did the things he did. That's what made me think about it yesterday was, you know, Felicia Jones, you did good with your boy. You know, his mom was the one out running drills with him. His mom and his little brother used to be the receivers for him. Probably better hands than some of the guys he's got right now. But, you know, when you think about that and you think about the confidence when he won the Heisman and they were talking about him not being a quarterback, who was the person telling him, you don't worry about it, you'll still be a quarterback? When he was in the first round and they were saying, you know, like, hey, he's not a first-round quarterback because he's not a quarterback. You know, you remember seeing the images, you know, in the picture in the green room, you know, and who was sitting there next to him the whole time, telling him, don't worry, the right team's coming, the right opportunity's coming, the right thing's coming. You know, so I think we could all agree on one thing. He won that game. He's been the Heisman Trophy winner. You know, we all want to see fun with the matchups next week. But with everything each one of us is dealing with at home, there's normally an MVP in your household, and it's no different in most households than it was with Lamar Jackson. And that is usually the MVP of your household is your mom. And so Lamar Jackson got the victory yesterday. Felicia Jones, you did a lot of the legwork to get him there. That's what I took away from the weekend.
Good stuff. Felicia Jones, you're our Monday morning MVP. And I will just add that the Lamar Jackson draft interview with primetime Deion Sanders was one of the best, if not one of the more memorable draft selection interviews, because you saw the emotion raw. On one hand, he was so upset that he didn't go as early as he thought. On the other hand, he was excited that he did go in the first round. But the chip on the shoulder and the words he said, I'm going to go get myself a chip. And to your point, John, at that interview, I just had nothing but like, hey, I hope this guy goes out and does it, because who loves the story of an underdog more than this great country? So Lamar Jackson, for whatever it's worth, I've got the Bills and the Bucks in the Super Bowl. Hey, we'll be back at it again tomorrow with Russell Landy and John Murphy. Big shout out to our guest today, Ralph Ventre. Tomorrow we'll have Russell Landy. We'll catch you next time, everybody.